But I appreciate the opportunity to be here because every day that I'm able to do this, I understand is something precious, and it could be the last time. So I really do appreciate it. This talk I'm going to give you around the world in 40 minutes is a foreign policy talk about what the United States government is doing around the world and what that might mean for you and for your children and so forth. But the things that we've heard this morning are all part of this, this same thing. It's part of a gigantic worldwide struggle that's going on right now by the forces of what some people might call the New World Order. That's what the first President Bush called it. You call it whatever you want to, but the United Nations divides it into three different categories. They say we're developed, we're rich countries, the United States, Western Europe, and the like. We're developed. Then they have a category they call developing countries. Those are the kind that have accepted the tenets of world government, but they're not quite there yet. They don't quite owe enough money to be totally developed. And then there's undeveloped countries who, you know, they're basically solvent. Once they become total debt slaves, then they're developed. But we'll look at this as we go along, and keep in mind as we go that it's all part of a plan. And I'm not talking about a conspiracy theory. I'm talking about the plan of power seekers around the world to seek power. I mean, it's simply what they do. It's something that they dream of, they work for, they lust for their entire lives to achieve it. And once they achieve it, they're going to use it against somebody. And it's usually the weak and helpless that they use it against. That's what power seekers and power holders do. And this is one reason why, from my perspective, I tell you this to tell you who and what I am so that you'll understand the things that I say in this talk. But I take the side of humanity against those who hold power. I take the side of people against the states of the world. As they build more and more power, we get weaker and weaker as they conduct their war against the human race, as I like to call it. It's all part of this gigantic network of people that are out there. So the world's a big place, and we only have 40 minutes, so let's get going. I thought that was supposed to be in color. Go back to the world for a second. This is the world, the political world as we know it today, and it is unfortunately run by lunatics and pathological criminals for the most part. And I'm saying that, well, as we journey around the world, hopefully you'll be able to see that. They all form a network. And the reason I say they're lunatics is sane people don't do what these people do. But since we have the whole world up there, basically the American military and foreign policy thrust right now is one of using the military and especially our Navy to control the various oil choke points of the world, which there are about 6, and we can look at them. Keep in mind as we do this that this country is technically bankrupt, but it continues its efforts every day anyway. For example, most of this foreign policy strategy that we're going to see is conducted with carrier forces. U.S. nuclear supercarriers like the George Washington that was just dispatched off the coast of Vietnam to conduct a joint exercise with the Vietnamese Navy. How much does it cost to keep the George Washington at sea? The answer is about $25 million per day, every day. That's why there may be a lot of carriers out there, but not many of them are at sea. They spend some time in port. How much does it cost to send the president on a 10-day visit to India, Indonesia, and Korea? $200 million per day, approximately. $2 billion, that's right. This is from a nation that is essentially, well, it's $14 trillion in debt, and that's a lot. We can go into that later, but let's go on and visit our friends in Europe. This is Europe, and as you've heard from the news recently, a lot of things are happening there, especially France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, or England. You've seen the pictures on TV of the various riots, things of that nature, going on, especially in France, as people rebel against what the French calls their austerity program. This man in France who came up with this idea to change the structure of French retirement, you've heard it as, you know, retirement at age 60, and all these French people were ready to burn down their country because they wanted to move it to age 62. But there's more to it than that, as there is most things. These people are enraged at Sarkozy's government because of many things, and what they see is hypocrisy, basically. They see a country that says, we're broke and we can't pay the social contract that we have with you that's existed for decades. Essentially, it's a 40-year, it's not just age 60, it's the level of payout into the system that the French people make, and generally that's about 40 years. But the man who came up with the idea of extending the retirement age, he was just involved in a scandal where his position in the government was used by this lady who had inherited the L'Oreal fortune, you know, to steer clients into this relative's investment firm and things of that nature. They see all this hypocrisy. They see a country that guarantees $150 billion in bailouts to the French banking system. And they're thinking, well, what about the taxpayers? I mean, why is it just the bondholders who always get bailed out? Why do the taxpayers take the haircut and the bondholders just let their hair grow? So they see this, and it's more to them than it is to us, because this is a system that their entire lives have been based on. At the same time, I read where there was a person in France, they call it the Secretary of State of this or that. They're basically cabinet level positions. This man who was elected Secretary of State in the Paris region spent his first couple of months in office. He spent 12,000 pounds, which is about, or euros rather, 12,000 euros, which is about $15,000 on Cuban cigars. One sympathizes, but still he should use his own money for that. And the people see that and they think, that's our money that he's doing that with. Well, the French and British have entered into a military alliance now where they're going to have a joint military force made up of British Royal Marines and SAS troops and the best troops in the French army. It's going to be commanded by a French general at first, but it rotates, I think, every couple of years. And they're basically allying themselves to fight what's going to happen when Spain and Portugal and Greece and Italy and Ireland and all those currencies, those countries, start collapsing under the weight of all this debt. In Germany, as you probably read, Angela Merkel now says that multiculturalism doesn't work, she says. And the German people basically want to be German again. They haven't been German since World War II. They were a little bit ashamed of what it meant to be German coming out of World War II. But now the German people are starting to say it's time for us to be German again. So the French and English always start to get a little nervous when Germans start talking about being German. But as we move across Europe and you see all these countries that used to be Soviet satellites in Eastern Europe, Romania especially, Joan and I have some experience in. But these countries have basically committed to NATO and have forces, even though minor, symbolic even. They're not symbolic to the people that are there in Afghanistan. I think Romania has like 800 troops in Afghanistan, and there are some U.S. forces that are permanently stationed in Romania now. And other places, you know, we occupied Germany in World War II, and we never left. We're still there. So I don't know that we have to worry so much about Russian tanks coming swarming across the plains of Eastern Europe now. You know, maybe we could save a little money by bringing these people home, maybe. But just look at these economies in Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain may be a slight exception. If you've traveled in those countries, you know that they're based on tourism and they're based on the sun. And the sun doesn't produce many cars or other things. There are no jobs there, in other words. And they still have the same social systems as these northern countries that have the manufacturing, Germany, France, and England. And so all these social services have to be paid for with something. And that something has been debt for the last few years. And as I said before, it's always the taxpayer who takes the haircut. The banks and their bondholders escape. Okay, this is, once again, we find these Soviet satellite countries. And this is one of the great oil choke points, the Bosphorus, from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean, that we're continually worried about and continually having forces to interdict. If you remember back in around August of 2008, when the trouble broke out in Georgia, and Georgia was invaded by some Russians with tanks and so forth, the United States sent ships into the Black Sea, which has always been kind of off limits, a Russian lake, if you will. But we sent some ships in to dock there to let the Russians know that we were still #1 in the world. And some Israelis joined us there as well and sent their message. The Russians don't seem to mind it too much. I mean, the United States has a defense budget, if you count the wars, what it spends on the various wars that we're fighting is roughly $1 trillion. And I think the Russians' budget is like 30 million, or 30 billion rather.